Perfect. All right, perfect. Get my notes up here. Blown in report. All right, perfect. So how long have you lived in Ellicott City? This is just no.
Well, technically, I don't live in Old Ellicott City.
Yeah,
but,
no, yeah.
I live in Catonsville, but my family arrived in the Patapsco River Valley in 1859. So we haven't gotten very far.
Yeah.
Have worked, oh heavens, really basically since, when did we move down there? 1969, I believe. Worked in town or, with actual businesses in town, or for other people in town. So.
And what was that like? It was like,
it was great. Initially, my father had an insurance agency that he did out of his home, and decided that he wanted to get away from having it in the house. So we moved to Main Street, to 8289 Main Street. So we had the insurance office there for 14 years. And then I had my own retail shop for 14 years, the Christmas company, which was all year round Christmas. And then what did I do? Then I volunteered and then was eventually hired at the Ellicott City B&O Railroad Station Museum. Then I worked for Howard County Tourism. Then I took a couple of years hiatus, worked at Wegmans in Columbia,
yeah.
and came back to work at the B&O.
Yeah, I worked at Wegmans too. So.
And Wegmans is a great place.
Oh yeah,
and
it's got everything.
I started my own tour company in 2016 called Maryland History Tours. So I now do the ghost tours.
Oh, that's
and
you.
we have probably a dozen other programs that we do besides the ghost tours.
Yeah, I've seen that online. So yeah, that's cool. So all right, yeah, we'll start with this one. So from the 60s and 70s, there's I've been looking through archived newspapers, and there's like a trend in rising crime. So from the 60s and 70s, there was like a slight increase in crime. Did you notice that at all? Like drug-related crime when you lived there, or?
Not really. I mean, I think we always knew that there were some users on Main Street.
Yeah.
But generally, I would say it was not something that was obvious in any way.
Yeah. In particular, I found an article about Sergeant Robinson and Sergeant and Detective Davis, and they sold hair. They used police informants to sell heroin in Baltimore, and that heroin made its way to Ellicott City. So, and they actually tried them in the Ellicott City courthouse because it came so, big in Baltimore. So they moved it to the Ellicott City courthouse. So, what are you doing? Yeah, my dog's misbehaving. He wants attention. Hi.
Wants to be on camera.
Yeah. Yeah, you can see me more. There he is. Yeah. All right, one second. I think he wants to be let out. I'm sorry. Give me a second here.
That's okay.
All right. Oh, man. So, all right. So you were there for the floods, right? In 1972?
Yes.
All right. So I guess tell your story about that. What happened? So.
Well, it had been a very rainy spring and early summer. And of course, it was evening is when the worst of the storm hit. I had an apartment at Town and Country, what was then Town and Country Apartments off of Rogers Avenue. Was watching a mystery show. The power went out, so I never did see how the mystery was solved.
Never know.
And then, of course, the next morning, Obviously, we're hearing stuff on the news, and my father owned an insurance agency. So, of course, we had some people insured. Our office was on Main Street at 8289, which is where Sweet Elizabeth Jane is now. And we weren't sure that we could get in. I suggested my father's situation. I just said, don't worry about you trying to go in. And I drove down, and of course the police were not letting anybody down. But I showed them my business card, and they allowed me to go to our office, which again was above, as I say, at 8289, which is right next to the Welcome Center. Of course, it was the post office then.
Yeah.
So we were above where any of the real flooding was, because the flooding, of course, from that one was from the bottom up, which was from the Patapsco.
Yep.
And so yeah, we obviously were getting some. We could not make phone calls east because of the phone lines that came under the bridge. So we could make phone calls going west, but we could not make phone calls going east.
Yeah.
We had some people calling to see if they had coverage. Of course, most homeowners policies do not cover flooding, so you needed a separate policy for flood insurance. We did have a few people that did have flood insurance. And of course, it was with with a business card that showed an insurance agent, we were able to walk down the street. And I recall walking up to where Kaplan's was, and the water line on their front door was at my mid forehead. So, yeah, and it was just, and of course, it was the bicentennial year for Ellicott City. So a lot of stuff had been planned for the fall. And so that was, everybody was worried, wondering whether that was going to happen or not. But of course, it did happen. We have an interesting group of people that were always associated with Ellicott City that always seem to get things done. So, yeah, but it was obviously for quite a while. It was a pretty harrowing experience. Till the street was closed. I'm not even sure how many months, but the street was closed because of the damage to the bridge and the debris. And
Yeah.
so, yeah.
That's incredible. I guess describe the community. Like, what was it like? How did y'all come together? That sort of thing.
Well, being a small town, pretty much everybody knows everybody else. If you spend any time on the street, the post office, of course, if you had a post office box, I most recently I've been referring to the post office as the 70s and 80s social media, because that's where you caught up on all your news. You would meet people that were going in to pick up their mail. You'd catch up on their news, on their family news. Well, again, everybody was a very close-knit community. As I say, it was just everybody kind of knew everybody else. It was basically a 2-block area. So we're not talking about, a major city in the sense of, being widespread. And then, of course, if you could help, everybody wanted to help. Wasn't like the past. I mean, to an extent, it was like the past 2 floods with everybody pitching in. There was a lot of that, obviously, because of the mud and the debris in the shops. But as it was just a close-knit community that, again, mostly everybody knew everybody. We patronized their stores, so you had a connection with them, and everybody just wanted to help. It was, as I say, the bicentennial was being planned, and at that time, there was still freight service at the B&O. So the trains were actually still stopping there to pick up and drop off freight. After that, because so much of the lines had been interrupted along the Patapsco River, they did not replace. It was a dual line, I think, up until then, and they only replaced a single line after that. So of course that would impact being able to pull, to stop. If you had enough traffic on the rails, it was difficult to be able to stop and load and unload if you didn't have another way for the trains to go around. So the B&O announced that they were going to stop freight delivery and pickup. It wasn't a whole lot of it at that point, but they were still stopping. But after the other line was gone, they said they weren't going to do it. And then they announced that they were considering tearing down the B&O station because they wouldn't use it anymore. So of course, everybody in town is like, wait a minute, it's not
Yeah.
just to be a railroad station.
Yeah.
It's the oldest surviving railroad station.
Exactly. Yeah.
So that basically the Bicentennial Committee, um, and there was another group that called Historic Ellicott City that was actually formed at the time, I think, after the flood. And they that I think the Agnes flood really was the catalyst for really launching the historic preservation movement in Ellicott City. There were people that realized the importance of the town and knew it was important to try to save it, especially with the announcement about the B&O station. So yeah, it solidified everybody's desire to start restoring the buildings. And of course, in the past, there hadn't been much physical changes to the buildings. There was a guy named Sam Kaplan who owned quite a few properties, and of course, Bruce Taylor's family from Taylor Manor, which is now Shepherd Pratt. They owned a lot of properties. I mean, they maintained them, but they didn't make major physical changes to the buildings, which was really great because the character and the flavor of the town were still there. So
Yeah. One second. I'm sorry. My dog is.
okay, I knew it was going to happen sooner or later.
Yeah, so I want to say two things. One, I'll probably do like an archaeology major in college. And on what you were saying about there being by the time that the flood came, there was like nothing left. Like it's crazy. I tried to I've only found like three houses like left with like foundations that I could find on a map, which is Mr. Kavanaugh's, and then up on the hill on Winchester, and then the Gray house. There's a mill owned by Mr. Gray, near what was that, the Copper branch of the river that went down sort of by
I
like
think is it Copper or Cooper? I think it's Cooper, but I want to
Cooper
swear to
branch.
that.
Yeah, Cooper branch. Yeah, and then God, something else that
There
wasn't
was
labeled.
yeah, Edward Gray owned a property on River Road, which is just east of town, and his son-in-law John Pendleton Kennedy, that was their summer home, but the mill operation, of course, was year round. And there were portions of that survived. They were majorly impacted in 1868 by the big flood in 1868, which
Yeah.
technically was the worst as far as the
Oh
number of
yeah.
people killed. But yeah, the house that I lived in right after I was born, which was on the Baltimore County side, right next to where the High's store and the fireplace shop is currently, right where the fireplace company built their patio. That's where our house was. Of course, we moved out of there in 1950, but that house actually washed away in the Agnes flood. It was still there until then.
Yeah,
Yeah, a
it's
lot of
incredible.
properties. My cousin owned a bar. It was Healy's Tavern, which eventually became Roscoe's, and that actually washed away in that as well. That was a little further east, just before you got to River Road. My understanding was that the people that owned the building were actually putting down a new tile floor, and while they were pressing the tiles into place, they felt like there was something pushing back as they were trying to push the tiles down. And so, of course, they go out to see what's going on. And of course, the river was right up under their building. And that's what the force was that they were feeling as they were trying to push the tiles down. The river was pushing up and trying to get into the building. So, of course, they immediately left. And of course, the building did collapse partially. Then, of course, it was torn down after that. But
Yeah. I know in 1866, when that flood right before the one in 1868. I know they were rebuilding the granite mill had burned down. They were
yeah,
rebuilding it, and they bought like $3,000 worth of lumber, which back then was a whole lot of money,
yeah,
and it all washed away.
yeah.
So yeah,
Yeah, Mother Nature is
she
quite a
don't care.
powerful lady.
Yeah, she does not
She
care.
does whatever she wants. I
Exactly.
keep saying, even today, I said, do not challenge her. Don't say, because there
Oh yeah.
was, after the 2016 flood, I think, there was a building that was redone. Actually, I'll take that back. It was after one of the fires. when the building was rebuilt, and the owners stood in front of the cameras and said, we've built a flood-proof building. And so Mother Nature said, you want to bet? And in 2018, the concrete and steel girder floor was all buckled and cracked. So because of the stream pushing up the Tiber Hudson, which is behind the building. So yeah, never challenge Mother Nature.
Yeah. And I find it funny because you think that after all the floods, they get flood insurance. But, only like 3 of them had flood insurance.
It
Which
is expensive. And I think there are a lot of, even though it's been a long time since I sold insurance, but I want to say there were some strange exclusions and things. Like if you had a basement, I think sometimes it would say, nothing would be covered in a basement. I'm thinking, well, wouldn't that be the first thing that would flood?
Yeah.
But of course, maybe that was the idea. They would save paying out on a claim. But yeah.
Gotcha. So let me pull my questions here.
And of course, the thinking, it'll never happen again.
It seems like that's what they always thought. Like they said, oh, this is the big one. It's never going to happen. But then it just happens again.
I think it's like around 20 floods we've had.
Oh yeah, 22.
Founded. So yeah. Historical Society, I think, has an exhibit up there on the floods. So.
Oh yeah. I've been there a bunch. So doing research and stuff. So oh yeah. Right after was Hurricane Eloise.
Eloise, yeah.
Yeah, Eloise in 1975.
Yep.
That wasn't nearly as bad, but
no, it was bad. I was actually on vacation in Ocean City at the time, and I remember, seeing on the news. So of course we called back. So they said, "Yeah, believe it or not, that was confined." I think, well, Agnes really, it was almost up to Old Columbia Pike. Eloise, I'm going to say, was just maybe 4 doors west of Maryland Avenue, where the B&O is. That area was majorly impacted down there.
Yeah, I know. I know. Going back to the flood of 1868, the Thomas Viaduct, that huge bridge. That 1860 almost like filled that up. Like literally like filled that. That's crazy. If you've been there, it's huge. Like that's a lot of water that needs to go in there.
Yeah.
And I was doing some what I've been doing is I've been mapping out flood damage. So I've been taking newspaper, accounts of what was damaged, and I've been mapping out, where everyone lived and what was damaged and all this stuff. It like goes all the way up the road. Like it's incredible. Like I know the big one was that in 1972, the flood, how there's like a turn, like a slight, curve, and then it goes to the light, the red and green light. Yeah.
Yep.
The flood of 1868 just went all the way up. Like it didn't stop, that's just incredible. Like the sheer power of, and that is a lot of water. Yeah.
And I mean, there's some great descriptions. There's some books that have great descriptions of that evening when the water came in, or the day when the water came in.
Yeah, I know. I was reading something about Dr. Owings. He watched his entire family die.
Yep.
Literally, like, and I almost cried like reading that because
they kept moving from roof to roof, and finally there was no other roof to move to,
and they just collapsed and they all drowned. It's incredible. Like, and literally they had to hold him back from jumping into the water, and they had to drag him back to the hotel.
Yeah.
Which is incredible to me. Like, I cannot imagine losing my entire family and just watching them all drown. Like, and then to get back up and still live there afterwards. Like, he still lived in Ellicott City. Like I wouldn't know what to do. Like,
yeah, we keep coming back.
Yeah, miraculously.
Yeah.
Oh man. So next up here. The economy. So I know back in the 19th century, 18th century, it used to be a very industrial economy. So you would have this thing between the Carrolls and the Ellicotts. The Ellicotts built, Ellicott Mills, and then they made the road, Frederick Road, up to the Carols. So Dunn, what is it? Dunn something Manor? I forget.
Joe
Dunn
Reagan.
Reagan Manor. Thank you. And they taxed those roads, and they made so much money off those taxes. Not only that, they had, Carol's sold wheat to the Ellicotts, and then the Ellicotts sold everything to Baltimore, and they got filthy rich off of it. And
Ellicotts were the
so,
first ones to dredge what is today the inner harbor and build piers so they could the ships could come in, would be enough draft that the ships could come in and they could ship their wheat to England.
really, that's
Yeah.
cool.
They were an amazing
Oh
family.
yeah, I know. Andrew Ellicott was he was a cartographer, and he pretty much taught Lewis and Clark everything. Like he was the precursor to Lewis and Clark.
Yeah, he
So
was Thomas Jefferson asked him to tutor them before they did the
yeah, so
expedition. Yep.
yeah. So my dog wants to be let in again. Oh yeah, economics. So it was very industrial based, and then sort of went to a more tourism based industry. I guess like how did you see that process happening? And I guess what sort of defining moments, like what were changes that were happening in Ellicott City through time you were there?
Um, well, of course, the town was a functioning town in the sense of, Howard County was really an agricultural community.
Yeah.
And if you needed anything, the place you went to was Ellicott City. That's where the banks were. That's where the grocery stores, the clothing stores, the undertakers. That everything was in Ellicott City, and functioned that way for a long time. And then as the Route 40, when that expanded, that used to just be a 2-lane road, if you can believe this. And as that expanded and shopping centers became the thing for people to go to spend their money in, a lot of the businesses in Ellicott City suffered because of that.
Yeah.
When I was in high school, um, it was not in a great place at that time. That was in 1965 to 69. And some of the storefronts actually on the lower level, there weren't stores in them anymore. People were actually living on the bottom floors where the stores normally would have been, and also on the second and third floors where there were apartments anyway. And then, as I say, the real catalyst came with a gradual turnover to tourism was after the Agnes flood and the interest in historic preservation. Ellicott City was really thought of as being kind of seedy, not the highest quality of
Yeah.
places. When I was in high school, I went to Mount St. Joe High School, and when anybody ever asked you where you were from, you would never say that you were from Ellicott City. Even though that was your address, we were west of town. You always said, "I'm from Howard County." You never said you were from Ellicott City,
Yeah.
for fear that somebody might think that you lived on Main Street. That's how bad the reputation of Main Street was.
Was it like crime and stuff? Like just like getting mugged?
Yeah, well, I think just the fact that there were so many empty stores, a more rural and maybe, I guess, I don't want to say less classy people, but I mean they were all the mill workers. That was basically who the population was. There were a significant number of bars. The where the trolley stop is now, at one time that was referred to as the Bloody Bucket, because there were so many fights from people that got drunk at the bar. So that was all part of the reputation. So just a place to come and drink and hang out. Yeah, and again, so many empty facades, no real businesses. And then with the preservation thing got started after Agnes, a real interest in trying to create things for people to come and see. Two of the people that were huge contributors to that were Roland and Annalie Bounds. Annalie owned Ellicott's Country Store, which is where Syriana is now. That was one of the first businesses. Annalie was the catalyst for creating or having them change the name from the Ellicott City Business Men's Association to just the Ellicott City Business Association. And it became a lot of shop owners in the past had all been men. Kaplan's actually, I think Rose was her name. Anyway, the Kaplan matriarch, she ran that business, and then her sons came in to help. But generally speaking, it was mostly male operated businesses. And with the changeover with the historic preservation, a lot of women saw it as an opportunity. They had interest in different things, and they thought, I could get an inexpensive place to rent on the street. But as I say, Annalie was really one of the major catalysts. Her and her husband, Roland, was a local lawyer. He did tons and tons of pro bono work for many nonprofits. But yeah, it was a gradual changeover. And as I say, a lot of the women that were involved in the preservation, the historic preservation, they began to open their own shops. And it just sort of grew from there. Persigals, of course, came into town. Then of course we had the fire. I'm going to remember what year that was. What year was that? In the 80s, we had the big fire that took out a huge section on the south side of Main Street. But yeah, Historic Ellicott City Inc., Ellicott City Restoration Foundation, and then of course we created a historic district, so that there were rules and regulations that govern anything that you could do to a building. The color of paint, any physical changes that you wanted to make, all had to be approved by the Historic Preservation Commission. So it was a way to make the town look better as things were redone, and keep the historic aspect of the town.
So I briefly wanted to talk about, so on the topic of sort of things changing, what were some things you liked, but also some things you disliked about change? Like what were some, things that were not so, good?
Well, I think some of this, some of the change, like when, the banks left town, the post office eventually closed. There were little independent grocery stores that were great places to go and buy stuff. So yeah, they were real losses at one time, believe it or not, where Old Mill Cafe is on the east side of the bridge. There used to be an A&P grocery store there.
Oh, really?
So, but I think just the independently owned shops that were like day-to-day things, as I say, the banks, the post office, Yates's Grocery, Paul Corn's Grocery, Paul's Market. And then we had our own cab company, Delp's Cab. And there were, clothes. There was Bob's 5 and 10. There was Kaplan's for clothes. There was Taylor's for furniture. So I mean, you really, you could really find anything you needed in Ellicott City. And as I say, the change started with shopping centers and out on Route 40 and beyond. And just the competition was just, they just couldn't stand it. Where Phoenix Upper Main is now, which of course was the Ellicott Mills Brewing Company, that was Talbot Lumber. That the two guys that were there most of the time when I was there was Milt Mazer and Ben Rosen. They were the son-in-laws of Nate Halswig, who owned it. They married his two daughters, and then they took over the business. But I mean, it was a real, I mean, everybody, as I say, everybody knew everybody in town. So when you went in, they knew you by name. You always got good service because you were friends. You weren't just acquaintances, and you weren't just walking into a store that 20,000 other people were walking into. Like the major stores today, like Home Depot and the grocery stores today. But yeah, it was sort of like Cheers. Everybody knows your name.
Yeah,
Everybody knew
exactly. Yeah.
everybody else. And I think, that's we have a very close-knit community today. Um, Not quite the same as it was when they were the shops that, that we really were going on for day-to-day living things. As I say, furniture and hardware and
Yeah.
food and clothes. So yeah, I think in a sense, uh, it lost some of its small townness, I guess you could say. But as I say, we really do have a close-knit community today. Again, everybody knows everybody. The shops, of course, are very different. They're all unique,
Yeah.
um, not necessarily essential things that you need
Yeah.
like it used to be. Um, but no, pretty much, if you walk down the street, I would say 9 times out of 10, easy. If you walk the 3 or 4 blocks, you're going to run into at least 10 people that you know as you're
Oh
walking down
yeah.
the street. You say hi and how you doing. So
Yeah. I got a job at Machitam Cafe over the summer. So, and I got to know all the locals, and
yeah,
Hatsumi, the woman who runs it, she's like a second grandma. She is the best. She's incredible. She's so sweet. I remember walking in one day, and there was she had made shrimp fried rice in karaage, which is Japanese fried chicken, just sitting on the table. She's like, "Oh, I made this for you." I was like, "God bless you, woman." Ooh, dude, I ate that so fast. It was so good.
yeah.
Oh man. Yeah. And I'm with, didn't Clark's move up to Route 40 and it's now
Yeah,
Ace?
Clark's Hardware was at where Antique Depot is now.
Yeah.
And as I say, Talbot Lumber, they had lumber and building supplies as well as hardware items. Clark's, I can remember Clark's. They also, I think I don't know whether they sold coal or not, but they had they did. I'm pretty sure that I know they did lawnmower repairs. They did a little bit of everything.
Yeah.
You could even buy, like if you were a farmer and you wanted to raise chickens, you could actually go there and buy, we refer to them as peeps. We occasionally would get those at Easter when we were little
Yeah.
kids. Yeah, so yeah, Clark survives, but not in the historic district. But
I mean, if you can't beat them, join them.
yeah, yeah, and they seem to be very successful today. And again,
Oh
it do
yeah.
very good service when you walk in. I would say probably at least 90% of the time, somebody's going to greet you and ask you if they can
Oh
help you with
yeah.
something. So yeah,
Yeah, definitely, because it's really strange, because as I've grown older and I've started to go to places and I have a car and I can travel and I can do things with my friends, you just get a lot better services, like especially from working at the Matchtown Cafe with these huge monotonous businesses.
yeah,
You don't care, you're just a cog in their big machine to make money. But in like a small business, you matter to them. They're your employee. If you make them money that they need to survive.
yeah,
And so it's very, you just feel like you belong. You're not just some dispensable, throwawayable gear. So just
yeah.
very nice.
I mean, we had 2 car dealers in town. There was Parlett Ford and Miller Chevrolet were in town. Were
Hmm.
actually in town. So yeah, it was an amazing place. And as I say, it was anything that you needed on a day-to-day basis, you could get in Ellicott City at one time.
Yeah. What else? Oh yeah. So I actually recently learned about this, the granite mill. So the original granite mill that the Ellicotts use is actually where the Highs is now. So, which I found, and and more on the flood, like those are big granite blocks, and
Yeah,
they just literally just toss them around
yeah,
like styrofoam. Like it wasn't even. I remember reading an account of the folks in the granite mill, and they just were in there, and all of a sudden the wall started just moving and swaying back and forth, and they're like, "Oh, we got to get out of here!"
yeah,
And they swam out, and I guess 4 or 5 people got stuck in the tower, and they drowned because yeah. And an incredible story I saw was there were only 3 survivors, and they all survived on like the one structure that was standing, and that was Ellicott Mills.
mm,
the original mill, and they had all climbed up on the ceiling. Those are the only three people to survive. So well, I thought that was really cool.
Yeah, a lot of harrowing experiences in town for
Oh yeah.
sure.
Yeah. What else do we have? Savings experience. Oh, so 2016, 2018 floods. That's very recent, you know. Yeah. So I guess the general consensus that I've gathered is that it's not really due to, construction. It's just Ellicott City is just a time bomb. It's built in the floodplain. There's no groundwater to seep into the ground because the entire, ground is made of granite. So
Yep,
there's
lots
no
of
way.
granite. Yep.
Yeah.
And the shape
So
of where we are, we're at the bottom of the valley.
giant
So that's
fishbowl.
all the
Yeah.
water flows to the bottom, of course. Yeah. I think I have seen some heavy storms, but nothing like we had in 2016 and 2018 with the amount of rain.
Yeah.
And I think obviously that, the change in climate,
Yeah.
I think is affecting the storms that we're getting. So yeah, when you've got, 6 to 10 inches of rain falling in a span of 2 hours, that's going to be a problem no
Yes.
matter where you're at.
Yeah.
Even on a flat surface, it's going to be a
Yeah.
problem. Because I know it was 2018, yeah. I was looking at pictures, they probably were posting the flood of 2018, and I'm going, can't figure out where that is in Ellicott City. Then all of a sudden I realized it was Catonsville, and it was parking lots off of Frederick Road, behind businesses,
Yeah.
that the water was up to the hoods of cars. They actually had more rain in that same storm in 2018 than we did in Ellicott City. They had like almost 3 inches more rain than what we had in the same time period. And had we had that, our log cabin would have gone, because the log cabin was very close to going in the
Oh
2018
yeah.
time, maybe a yard behind that, where it was at the time. The earth had washed away, and if we had had that extra 3 inches, that cabin would have gone too. I'm pretty
Oh,
sure.
that would have been bad.
We lost
That
the
was
courthouse, the original courthouse. There's an amazing video of the guy that was the parking meter guy. Literally seconds before the building collapsed, he came out of that building, and it's just hard to believe. The timing is everything, and he was very, very lucky to get out of there before it collapsed, for sure.
That's incredible.
But yeah, and I mean, pervious surfaces is an issue. There is a lot of construction around.
Parking lots. Yeah.
There are, mitigation has been happening in most recent years, but many, many years ago, you never heard of flood mitigation. There was never anything like that. A lot of the older developments, that are pretty close to Ellicott City, there was no flood mitigation, or floodwater management. So, yeah.
Yeah, I noticed
It's multiple factors. As I say, I think the climate change has a lot to do with it, with the amounts of rain that we're getting. But yeah.
Yeah, I
And
noticed.
as I say, bottom of the barrel. It's all going to run downhill, and we're downhill.
Yeah. Yeah. So in the sort of like they started flood prevention, and then they kind of just stopped when Hurricane Agnes hit. So they kind of started, doing some things, and they just stopped. Did they do you know why that happened, or did they just run out of money? Or
I'm not sure what was being done prior to Agnes. I know, they had monitoring systems, where they would tell you, like at Liberty Dam, if there was what the depths of the water, they would send notices down.
Yeah.
We'd be on the receiving end of anything coming from there.
Yeah.
But yeah. And then there were things that they did, the stormwater retention ponds. Most developments, had those. The question would be, of course, at least in those days, it probably was enough to help in some way. But today, with the amount of rain, most of those and I know the county is redoing several of those, that existed before. They're redoing those to make them deeper, to hold more water.
Yeah.
But yeah.
I
I think,
know
you get we had the 2011, we had a situation where, did you lose your power? Oh, I
no.
got it.
Yeah.
Okay. 2011, there was a storm, and a lot of debris was in the smaller streams, and it clogged culverts and stuff, and the water came up and out and went down Main Street. I'm going to say maybe a foot to 2 feet going down Main Street.
Ooh.
That was a wake-up call that we didn't really heed, I don't think. The response was, "Oh, this was a one-time thing. This is not going to happen again." And so there was an effort to help at least address cleaning debris out of the streams.
So this was
Um,
before or after Agnes. So
this was 2011. This was way
2011.
after Agnes.
Gotcha. Oh yeah, I heard about that. All right. Yeah, this is the 2011 flood or
Yep, yep. And it
gotcha.
was,
All right.
I mean, the majority of what was impacted were basements at the lower end of Main Street.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was, as I say, that should have been a wake-up call, but we we all were convinced that it was an unusual thing that was never going to happen again. So
Yeah. And Calvin Ball's plan to re to save Ellicott City. What do you think of that? Because from what I've gathered, it's not really gonna work. I mean, so there's no protection against
well,
flooding from Patapsco at all.
there, well, yeah, I mean, there's no guarantee on anything that anybody does, truly.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the tradition had been, the bottom up in 1950s. I want to forget the year, but it was in the 1950s, early 1950s, I think. We had a similar situation from the streams behind the stores on the south side. There were portions of buildings that collapsed and formed dams, and then the water, of course, came up, and the only way for it to go was out through the buildings.
Yeah.
But the tradition had always been that the Patapsco was what would rise and cause the flooding. I know they're doing multiple flood mitigation things. I'm a little concerned that they're creating off of New Cut, they've created a wider, deeper channel, but once the water gets into Ellicott City, it's got the same problem. Nothing has been done in town to help when the water gets there. So I mean, I know there are things that are planning. I know next year, I think there are 4 buildings that they're going to take down will come down probably in the spring. And they're going to redo that area down there. They're going to supposedly put twin culverts, will be diverted across Maryland Avenue, under Maryland Avenue, and over under the turntable at the B&O, then out into the Patapsco. Then, of course, there's the famous North Tunnel, which is now starting at Route 29 and coming into town. So, and I don't know when that's going to start or how long it's going to take, but I think it's going to take quite a while. So, and my question with that is, okay, suppose you get the tunnel in and it works. It's a 15-foot diameter tunnel. If that's full of water and it's being dumped into the Patapsco 100 feet in front of our traffic bridge and 150 feet in front of our historic B&O station, what effect does a 15-foot wall of water being dumped into the river have on those two things?
Yeah. I know.
It won't be good, I don't think.
Yeah. I know, but it's just I was thinking about it because I have a friend at school who's doing flood mitigation in planting trees, that sort of stuff. And we're just thinking like there's got to be a better way, like because that tunnel's going to cost like $300 million. That's a lot of money, and I feel like it's just you could do a lot more with $300 million, and just making. I do agree with the because the Liberty Dam has stopped a lot of flooding from the Patapsco River. It's done a great job of mitigating floods. But it did finish that's when they finished in 1970, and then right after it flooded. Yep. So it definitely did reduce the amount of flow through the river, but it's still not gone, the risk. And so she and I were like, we definitely wish we could have seen, flood prevention from the Patapsco. So maybe, something to protect stuff on the Patapsco. The, what is that? Not the nurse. Is there a nursing home? The homes right on the Patapsco on the Baltimore side. Like those are really like in danger. There's nothing. If
No, I
there's
mean, it would seem to me, and of course, I guess I don't know how much it would cost. I would imagine it would be the Army Corps of Engineers. Um, that the Patapsco really, I think, should be deepened
oh yeah.
um, to help with with the waters coming in. And it could also help with the top down situation. If there's lots of water coming down, if the river's deeper and able to hold more water,
Yeah.
it can assist in that way. But as far as I know, nobody is suggesting that deepening of the Patapsco. So
Yeah. And I know there's a lot of environmental stuff
oh
that you
yeah,
have to jump through and a lot of hurdles. And in terms of like, Maryland has a lot of, laws. So in terms, I know I was talking with my boss Hatsumi. They were thinking about going to Texas because there's not a lot of, because I was trying to get a job in excuse me, it's a pain in the ass. Like there was like you had to have like all these forms signed and all this stuff from the Maryland government, like poking their nose and things. It's like it's ridiculous. So there's a lot of rules and regulations you have to follow. And it feels like that's sort of, hampering progress. So,
okay.
um, sorry, I am like 18 minutes over our time. If that's fine, I'm sorry. I just got one more question. Um, let's see,
I'll run you a tab. It's okay.
yeah, I'll give you a good tip. Don't worry. Climate change. Another one. All right. So last question. Um, just stories of people. So I guess what were some happy moments in your time in Ellicott City? Like what were the memories that you had, regardless of flooding, everything, you personally that stick out the most, happy or sad? Just spill it.
Well, I mean, the business that I had on Main Street, well, the businesses, I should say, the insurance agency, the interaction with their customers, and the same when I had my Christmas shop, my year-round retail shop. Just the interaction with the customers. There are still customers that I still get Christmas. I mean, the shop closed in 1980. No, wait, we said the 2001 is when the shop closed, and I still get Christmas cards from people that were customers. Um, so yeah, a lot of great experiences with people that we met in the two businesses that we owned. And of course, lots of losses. So many people that that I knew. Um, the Yateses, of course, the Bounces, and again, knowing that the Bounces, of course, because of their preservation efforts, but the Yateses were just amazing people. He owned the grocery store, and his wife ran the hardware store next door. So yeah, I think the happiness and the sadness, it's the people that you've known and the people that you've lost, I think are the most
Yeah.
cognizant things for me. So
Yeah. Well, I think that's everything I wanted.
that's
So
okay.
thank you so much. This is really fun to talk with you. So it's really hard to get people interested in history and because people just fall asleep. I love the stuff.
I've got pictures of me in the Garden of Eden.
Oh, you do?
I have well, I guess I could call him a friend who started, what is it? Ed Lilley in through history or something like that. So I'm at Plymouth Rock. I'm in the Garden of Eden. I'm with Neanderthals. The best one was with next to Moses at the parting of the Red Sea, and the caption was Ed's first flood mitigation project. You might, if you're on Facebook, you might be able to find him. Ed, I think it was either W. Edward Lilly through history or something like that. And there's some amazing pictures there.
Yeah.
It's easy to pop somebody's face into a picture today. So
Yeah. Yeah. I love the whole Santa Claus vibe you're giving off. It's really making me jolly right now. So yeah. Yeah. It's hard to get people interested in history. And like I guess my sort of goal, my end goal was to tell the stories like, because there's so many individual accounts and
Oh, yeah.
stories that I wanted
Yeah.
to tell. And so I wanted to sort of, tell the story of the culture, but I wanted to tell the story of every individual, give their, what they saw and what their lives were
Yeah.
like.
Yeah.
And so this interview really helped a lot on that. I could, and especially a lot on, the Clarks and everyone, I can sort of piece that together.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was great. Thank you so much
All
for
right.
this interview.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
Yeah. All right. Yeah. So I guess that's it. Thank you so much.
All right. I will leave the meeting.
All right. Thank you so much. Have a good one.
Thanks, you too.